So first things first, who are you, what's your role, and where do you work?
Yeah. Well, hi, everyone. I'm William Dennis. My role is product manager, and I work at Google on Google Kubernetes engine.
Now, what are 3 Kubernetes emerging tools that you are keeping an eye on?
I guess the 3 I'm really keeping an eye on, I'm most excited about the in-place pod updates. Which is the ability to update the resources of a pod after it's been scheduled. Really excited about this one because it ties into things like VPA, kind of a lot more dynamicism in the process. I think it's in beta now, so I'm really kind of watching that one and sort of excited to see that roll out. The other one also kind of, I guess, at the pod resource level, maybe this is just a area of interest for me, but I'm also interested in the pod level resource request. So that's the ability to kind of specify memory CPU at a whole pod level rather than individual containers. I think that takes a lot of the kind of drudgery out of kind of right-sizing these things. So I'm very excited to see that one kind of rolling out through the process to hopefully to GA soon. And finally, I guess, since we're in the age of AI, I'm keenly looking at LLMD and inference gateway and some of the components of that as well, and sort of seeing how that's going to be picked up and adopted.
So to dig into some of the topics that have come up in our podcast episodes, our guest Mac believes the designers of Kubernetes didn't set out to build an overcomplicated piece of software, that rather it grew organically with hard-won knowledge baked into the code base. How do you view the complexity versus capability trade-off in Kubernetes?
Yeah, I really like this question actually, because it comes up a lot. I'm on Twitter, I'm on X, right? And I see all the complaints about, the memes, I guess, about Kubernetes being complex. Look, this is how I look at it. We're all professionals, right? The goal here is a professional tool that helps us get things done. And I think whatever tool delivers that value is what people are going to use. And I think it's quite clear by now that we can see that the market has kind of chosen Kubernetes, right? There's a reason why it's so popular. And I believe that reason is that it delivers on the needs that people have. And at the end of the day, that's the important thing. And, if you simplify it, the problem is that essentially you simplify all the bits that people need, right? You could say, oh, let's make it really simple and get rid of, persistent volume, right? Who needs that, right? You should be writing to, an object store or something, right? Well, okay, but I've got a database that, maybe it's a modern deployment that I'm doing, or maybe I've got a legacy system and I need a disk. Give me a disk, right? So I think the complexity is there for a reason, and that reason is to deliver value. And I think a lot of that conversation kind of can miss that nuance, but then look at what people are using, and they're using Kubernetes. Why? Because it helps them get done what they need to do. So I think at the end of the day, that's kind of the reason it ends up being a little complex. And I think on the flip side, right, if we want to talk about, Kubernetes and how to make it simpler, I think the key is can it be simpler to learn, right? So rather than looking at the overall total and how complex it is it possible just to get started quickly? And this is one thing I tell people, right, is you can get started quickly. If you just want to run a little web service, you just need to learn one object, right, which is deployment, and then service to kind of open it to the internet. That's it, right? Deployment, service, learn those 2 things. It's basically 2 config files and get going. So don't kind of look at it as I've got to learn pod spread topology and everything up front, right? It's just start with a simple example, start with just running some code, just run a container on the internet and build it from there, and typically build it based on requirements, right? I have high availability requirements. Now I'm going to learn the pod spread and things like that. So that's kind of how I recommend getting over the complexity. It's not kind of railing against it. It's more just learning it piece by piece.
Another one of our podcast guests, Mark, thinks that with Kubernetes, it's quite easy to pay more than necessary because you pay for allocated or provisioned infrastructure, machines you start that are often underused. What strategies do you use to optimize Kubernetes costs?
Yeah, so I think, for starters, you definitely recommend things like Horizontal Pod Autoscaling, HPA, and Vertical Pod Autoscaling, VPA, because at the end of the day, the scheduler is allocating resources based on the requests in the pod, right? The memory, the CPU, the GPU that the pod is requesting. That is how the resources are allocated. So you can do bursting. There's a lot of things you can do to kind of fine tune that. But at the end of the day, if your resources are kind of out of whack, then you're going to end up paying a lot more than what you need to do. So I think those tools are very useful for right sizing. And actually, one thing on VPA that I think is really cool that everyone should be doing is you can run it in advisory mode, right? So, VPA is a tool that can essentially resize the resources of the actual containers. And the problem with that is, at least before iPPU, which is the technology that I mentioned at the beginning that I'm excited about and kind of watching, but before that's a thing, it would actually restart the pod and it would have some other sort of side effects that perhaps undesirable. But you can actually just run it in advisory mode. So when you run it in advisory mode, you basically just get some data written to the Kubernetes resource that says, hey, this is what the system thinks this container needs, right? And it's almost like, and particularly on my products on GKE, right, it's basically free to get that data. So why not just turn it on and get that data written into the container, right? And then you can use it or not use it. So I think that's very useful. And the other thing, of course, is like, make sure you're using a platform that has auto scaling at the platform level, right? So you've got HPA, VPA, right-sizing the pods, and then you want to have, the platform also kind of managing that. And that's something that my team has, really intently been looking at recently. Which is like how to create a dynamic platform that, where you're only paying for the resources that your pods need.
Our guest Molly believes many people initially think they need their own cluster because they're scared of multi-tenancy, but they learn that the operational overhead of maintaining multiple clusters is significant. What's your experience with teams being scared of multi-tenancy versus dealing with operational overhead?
So I think the most important thing is to treat the clusters like cattle. I know this is like something that's been said, probably repeatedly, but I think it's really important. And the analogy of treating them like cattle is kind of treating them like a herd, right? So you have like a herd of clusters. You don't want to kind of get to know any of the individual clusters like really well in the herd, right? You just want to treat them as a group. I think that's really important. I think where Kubernetes gets where the overhead gets significant is when you end up, just spending a lot of time individually tuning individual clusters. And I think, I would have the same advice whether you're managing kind of 5 or 1,000 clusters. Ideally, you're sort of still treating them all kind of the same. And I think, I think that's the kind of the best setup to have. If you sort of, if you can sort of treat everything very automatically, very methodically, you can set up things like, fleets, at the platform level to kind of coordinate things. You can set up, CI/CD systems that coordinate. I think if you can actually achieve that, then most of that overhead goes away, and it also probably means you're in a better, stronger operational stance as well. So like just beyond multi-tenancy, if you can really just sort of spin these things up and down very 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 quickly, I think it puts you in a very kind of strong stance, and my product can go to like 15K nodes, and I think even 65K nodes in some configuration, and the temptation could be there to like create like a mega monster cluster, but actually like that capability is mostly being built for kind of like massive like AI training jobs and stuff that really does have to coexist. Even if it can go to such big scale, it's not necessarily the right thing to always just pack everything in there. I think from my view, right, it's also just a risk of like single point of failure, right? So like, in the multi-tenancy environment, per the question, if you have, 50 tenants in one cluster and the cluster has a problem, then that's 50 people affected. So, obviously there's a balance. I'm definitely not advocating like necessarily having, one cluster per tenant if you have a lot of tenants, but not to be scared of multiple clusters. I think that's the key. I think if you're really scared of multiple clusters, it might indicate perhaps another issue, right, that you haven't set up, perhaps like the fleet automation as well as it could be.
Kubernetes turned 10 years old last year. What should we expect in the next 10 years to come?
Yeah, man, this is a hard question. I think it's technology. One thing I think is interesting, here in Silicon Valley, right, is that and this is more companies than tech, but like all these companies are kind of built on the sites of other companies, right? Like I think, for a long time, I don't know if they still have it, like the Facebook sign, like on the back, I think was it Sun Microsystems or something, right? There's like another company on the back, and they left it there, I think, to remind themselves to sort of be humble. One of the buildings around the cloud office for Google is like built on the old Atari headquarters, right? So I think this is always hard to predict. But I think the key thing is, just keeping up with trends and kind of renewing, right? And just keeping up with things. I think, there are a lot of examples of of projects that have, done exceptionally well over, very long time frames. Like I think like Linux is like the best example that comes to mind. So, I kind of have a lot of hope for Kubernetes. I think it is on that kind of Linux trajectory. So I think the key is, and I see like, what we do, 3 so-called minor releases a year, which are actually massive, right? And if anything, I have, customers complaining to me about that pace of change. Maybe they want the 1 or 2 features that they're waiting for, but all the rest can be a bit of a burden. So I think, all those trends look good to me, right? Like, very strong community. It's not vendor dominated, keeping up with the technology, I think, is the key, and actually, like, going to the earlier question, right, just being that flexible general purpose platform, not getting, hyper specific, just staying generalized and being able to run everything. If you can do that well, and if you can solve real problems that people have, you're going to stay relevant. So I think that's the key for me. So yeah, just keeping up with the tech, looking at the AI space, what do AI users need, making sure that's all in the platform as well. Can they route their requests properly? Is the scaling working for them? Is the scheduler working, for other resources like GPUs, TPUs, things like that? But yeah, all signs point to doing that pretty well. So I think we can expect a lot of good releases and a lot of good technology in the next 10 years.
And what's next for you, William?
Yeah, so yeah, looking at October right now, I guess, in the year, and excited to go to KubeCon next month. One thing I did a couple of years back is I actually wrote a book on Kubernetes. It's called Kubernetes for Developers, and we're actually going to be giving away a bunch of copies. So if you can come and meet me on the show floor, I think it's going to be Tuesday the 11th, November the 11th at 3:45. Wednesday the 12th, November 12th at 3:30. So I'll be there. We'll have a bunch of copies. I think we'll have some like PDFs as well if you don't want to throw something in your backpack. So. Looking at that, and yeah, I work on the Autopilot product for GKE, and yeah, we've been expanding that product recently, and building up what we call like a container optimized compute platform, which is like a new way to run pods. So I've been looking at that and expanding that and making that better for our users. So that's kind of what I've been working on.
And if people want to get in touch with you, what's the best way to do that?
Yeah, probably the best place is on Twitter or on X. So my username is just my name. So it's William Dennis with 2 N's and 2 S's on the Dennis. I think the link might be on the podcast as well. So yeah, that's probably the best way to get in touch. You can always DM me as well if you want. LinkedIn is as well, but. Yeah, I think I check Twitter more.
Well, William, thanks so much for your time. Look forward to seeing you in Atlanta. Take care.
Yeah, thanks so much, Bart. Appreciate it.